Hello and welcome to the first of our preset deep dives in this Arturia CS-80V tutorial series, and this is where we really get into the good stuff. We've done all the work figuring out how the synth works, and now we get to dive into a juicy preset and figure out how all of this stuff plugs together and how we get to make awesome musical sounds. That's all we care about. This is the preset I've picked. I'm just holding a note down here, and you can hear there's some kind of, you might initially be forgiven for thinking it's an arpeggio, but it's not. There's nothing going on with the arpeggiator. It's actually coming off the LFO. But we'll break it down section by section and figure out what's going on. Okay, first things first, it's a 2 oscillator sound. So we've mixed both oscillators together. We're not in multi-mode, so we don't need to worry about voice modes or polyphony or zones or any of those things. Even though I said in that tutorial that I always have multi-mode on, if it's off, I'll leave it alone. As long as you don't touch it, it's absolutely fine, so I won't go near it. We do have some modulation effects, we'll cover those later. But for now, let's just get into the oscillators and figure out what they're doing. So let's have a listen to just oscillator 1 on its own. And we can see working from the left that we have a free-flowing LFO cycling in the background. Doesn't care when we press the key, it's just going to catch up with us whenever we do. And it's oscillating at just under 1/4 of a hertz. So once every 4 seconds this thing completes one complete cycle. And it's in a saw up or ramp mode, which means it slopes up and then falls off the cliff. Let's just take a moment to think about the LFO, because we're actually going to have to talk about the modulation banks as well if we're dealing with this. It's not just changing the width of the wave. If we listen to this, it's got really quite that deep resonant kind of sound. Ordinarily, when you're just dealing with pulse width, you should be able to turn the oscillator off and change the width of the wave and get the same sound, but we can't. The reason we can't, let's go back to the default preset, is because LFO1 is doing other stuff as well. It's applying a modulation to the low pass filter cutoff frequency. So it's doing, if I turn this off, it's doing this. That's what we're hearing, but it's obviously doing it dynamically. Let's go back to the bass preset. So the LFO is doing 2 jobs. It is modulating the width of the square wave, as you can see, quite intently, but it's also applying a cutoff to the low pass 1 filter, and it's the combination of those 2 sounds that's giving us that rich changing, modulating tonal effect. Speaking of the VCF itself, slight red herring, the high pass filter is on, but I've listened quite carefully and broken it down quite intently, and I don't think it's having much effect on the sound. If it's doing anything, it's attenuating the very lowest frequencies when the LPF is doing its sweep. It's just cutting out some of that bass, but it's a very, very subtle effect, if at all, because the high pass filter is set all the way to the bottom of the slider. So turning this on and off doesn't actually have any effect on the sound. The filter itself, completely basic, standard stuff, no attack, no decay. We've just got a little bit of release on the filter sound, so that when we let go of the key, it glides away elegantly. In addition to the VCA also fading away nicely. No sine wave, nothing dramatic going on with the touch response. So that's VCO1 dealt with. VCO2, let's turn that all the way up. really quite plain sound, really. It's just giving you some depth and oomph to the sound. It's actually, if we go back to the standard preset, this slider is set slightly towards VCO2, so this is the dominant sound. And now it's all of the sound. So it also has an LFO in free mode. This time we have an oscillating sine. If we make it go crazy, we'll figure out what it's doing. There we go. So it's a low modulation effect, so it's subtle, but it's nice. Back to our bass sound. So that's cycling roughly 3 times every 2 seconds. We have the low pass filter engaged, but no envelope to speak of. So effectively, it's the static, quite low frequency oriented tone that we hear when we mix those two together. We get a nice effect. The ring modulator has some of the sliders set, but it's not currently on. That doesn't mean it's dead. That's a great modulation source. If we go back to the basic sound, play something, there's no ring modulation there at all. There's a setting somewhere in the middle there that's actually quite nice. Oh yeah. So again, you know, don't just presume that because something's not active, it doesn't have the potential to be active. Now let's have a look down here. What have we got over here? We've got some chorus on. Let's have a listen to what that sounds like. So that's with the chorus on. Yeah, it's a much plainer, harmonic-less sound. Turn that back on, and obviously delay. Doing what we know delay does. The stereo delay on this instrument is just absolutely to die for, completely magnificent. Okay, so that's all the stuff in here. Let's have a whiz through the modulation settings. We've already had a look at LFO1, the fact that it's applying a modulating effect to the low pass filter cut. But we've also got 3 Aftertouch settings, so let's figure out what's going on with the Aftertouch. I'll play a note. Now I'm going to depress Aftertouch. Wow. And then off again. Okay, so firstly we've got yet another modulation to the low pass filter cutoff, and these are all the LFO is playing quite a gentle change, but the Aftertouch is very intense, which is why we're getting the full frequency range, and we're also modulating the LFO1 speed, so that's what's accelerating the LFO, making it go really, really fast. Now I said earlier high pass filter 1 wasn't doing anything to my ears. I have played with the Aftertouch as well. If we isolate it, so I've just taken Aftertouch off everything else, so that this is the only effect now being modulated by Aftertouch. Down, up, down, up. I really don't think it's doing anything. So I've spent quite a bit of time trying to figure out if it is, and not to my ears. If it is, it's subtle beyond my ability to identify, so I don't worry about stuff I can't hear. When I was talking about LFO1 earlier, I talked about the low pass filter cutoff, but I actually forgot to talk about the VCO1 frequency modulation. It's doing that as well. So this is the LFO with its ramp shape 3 times every 2 seconds, changing the pitch of VCO1. So if we take the other LFO effect off and then maximize this, that's where you're getting your tonal sweep from. Take all the modulation away. There you go. So it is actually applying a pitch modulation as well. These three are off. We've got more low pass 1 cut off modulation being affected by the wheel. So let's get back to our standard sound. So wheel all the way down. I'm just going to turn it all the way up. So it's obviously brightening the entire sound as it raises the low pass filter's cutoff frequency. And that's it, a gentle introduction. I think this one is a nice place to start, bringing all of these different modules together. And I've obviously only just been mashing away on a single key, but it is just like straight out of Blade Runner. And then when you do that kind of, you press down on the Aftertouch and you get this explosion of weirdness, a wonderful sound. Hope you enjoyed that, hope it was informative, and I hope to see you again for the next VST deep dive. Thanks very much for watching.